All right, good morning. Y'all ready to get started? Yes, finally. My name's Ross Young. I'm the County Extension Director here, and you are at the Extension Office, kind of operated by North Carolina State University. And some of you guys have got strange looking tags. I've seen tags from other states here, right? If you're from another state, will you raise your hand? Okay, yeah, half of y'all. So, in your state, you have what we have here. You have a land-grant college somewhere in your state that has extension offices. Our land-grant college is NC State and A&T State University in North Carolina, and we are an outreach of that. So every county in the state has an extension office, and our job is to help you guys learn research information about plants and people and kids and families and communities. So today we're learning some stuff about some plants, a really cool plant, and a plant that I've loved a really long time in my life. So I grew up hunting ginseng and planting ginseng, and unfortunately, I have never sold ginseng. I hope that today's agenda is packed with a lot of information, and I think you'll leave here with some knowledge that may help you grow ginseng better or get in the industry or decide not to. Be next. So as I mentioned, NC State University, we have field faculty and we have specialists and assistants. Who's speaking now are folks who are bringing the research to you, who do research on our commodities and then present that research, scientific-based research, back to us and help us learn from that. So, Dr. Janine Davis, are you speaking first?
Okay. We're tag teaming.
Tag teaming.
Thanks, Ross. So, I'm in the Department of Horticultural Science, and we are some of the fortunate NC State faculty who don't have to live in Raleigh. So we're at a research and extension center out by the Asheville Airport, where we have woods, where a number of you have worked with our plants. So come on out and see us sometime. Particularly, Margaret is one of the leaders of the Western North Carolina Herb Club, and so they do a lot of work outside learning how to grow and harvest and plant. And Ross was reminded this morning when I showed up, my very first ginseng meeting that I attended when I started here 28 plus years ago was at the old Madison County Extension office. And that was up these narrow stairs. Have any of you been to that old office? And there were so many people there in that little tiny room that I actually stood outside the doorway and spoke into the room. And then there was an old man who couldn't get up the stairs, and I gave him all that information again, leading on the back of his pickup truck outside under the street lamp. So, fond memories. So this presentation was supposed to be done by Joe Hollis, a dear friend of both Margaret and I'm sorry, Margaret, I failed to introduce who Margaret is. So Margaret is a research assistant in my program, and she's my medicinal herb person. So she leads a lot of the programs, a lot of the research, works with the Herb Club, just taught a voucher workshop yesterday, so she's a busy woman in my program. And my program wouldn't be what it is without all of my wonderful employees. But Joe Hollis was supposed to give this presentation. Dear friend, we would have picked up different kind of information from Joe. I was looking forward to hearing from him. He has a very, very special relationship with these plants, so they're very nice. So I was asked to cover some definitions for you to start. The first one is, we've got different ginsengs. How many people here right now grow any of their own ginseng? You're among friends, so we can say it here. Okay, quite a few of you. All right, so I will keep that in mind. We'll try to go a little bit deeper. But for those of you who haven't, who are kind of new to ginseng, the industry, the culture of ginseng is built around the Asian ginseng, which is grown in Asia, such as Korea. This is highlighting a Korean company. This is from their website. And that is known as Panax ginseng. And Panax ginseng has been used for thousands of years. It's very much a part of the culture, the religion, the life of the people in that region. Their wild plants are extremely rare, so all the Panax ginseng that you see is cultivated. And this one's a little different than ours, that it's considered warming, so it's supposed to increase the yang energy. It's invigorating. It helps give blood sugar regulation. It's got lots of things, but remember that it's the warming ginseng. Our ginseng is Panax quinquefolius, so it's the same genus, but a different species. And this was discovered in Canada by a priest back in the 1700s. And very quickly they found that this was of great value to Asians, and this started just boatloads of ginseng being shipped to China. And we've all seen the pictures with piles of dried ginseng root this big and these old guys in their hats next to them. So it is very valuable. We, of course, very, very quickly over-harvested it ourselves also and had to start cultivating it. This ginseng is also very useful, but it's not the same thing. So this is considered a cooling ginseng. It's very good for working with the immune system, also helps regulate blood sugar. And early in my career, I had an American ginseng expert from China. His name was Sijia Qi. Some of you probably had met him. And after he'd been here for about 6 months, he said, "You all really need your ginseng. We need to calm down and slow down," and that it was good for that.
And then we have Jiaogulan. So we've been looking at different roots of the various panic species, and this is an herb, a member of the cucurbit family, a climbing plant, and we'll get into more details about that later in the presentation. The herb part is used, so the above ground portion, and it contains similar chemical constituents and medicinal properties like ginsenosides to the Panax ginseng and our ginseng here. A mortality plant, it was found, it's more modern in terms of its use as we understand it. It has been used for who knows how long in remote villages in southern China, and in the 70s there was some scientists as part of a Chinese national survey of some sort that were looking into census data, and people in these remote villages had really low rates of cancer, very high longevity in their lifespans and things like that, and in surveying found and brought it back to their consumption and use of Jiaogulan, also known as southern ginseng, and that's Gymnostemma pentaphyllum. So this is an interesting addition for something that has similar compounds to the ginseng roots that we use, whereas the aerial part is used in this case.
And this is one of Joe's.
This is one of Joe's
favorite popularity of wild ginseng is now threatening, really threatening these plants. It has not been helped by us being now on television shows and just, the whole wild west of ginseng hunting. But that's not all that gets it. Climate change is starting to affect it. Joanne McCoy at the Arboretum is very, very concerned about what she's seeing when she's going out and monitoring populations. Forest Service is reporting similar losses. We're losing habitat to development. In some areas, the damage done by deer is just devastating. We don't seem to have that so much here, but you get up into West Virginia and above, and a lot of damage that way. So we have concern over these wild populations. You see the increasing market demand for it. We need to grow this plant. Now next. So I think it should be cultivated. I've spent my career teaching people how to grow this plant in addition to others. I never recommend just growing ginseng for a bunch of reasons. So I believe in diversity. We'll talk more about the theft problem, but that can be devastating and something needs to be in your mind. So having other income sources there is wise. Ginseng's propagated almost entirely by seeds. There are some people that make a business of selling 1, 2, and 3-year-old rootlets, but nobody that I know would ever plant a big area using rootlets. But it's a good way to generate some income. This is woods grown or woods cultivated ginseng, where you're basically just doing the same thing that you do under artificial shade, but you're doing it in the woods. So you try to build raised beds, you amend the soils, you're using fertilizer, you're changing the soil pH, you're planting those plants very, very close together. And when you do that with ginseng, you've got to use a regular fungicide spray. I would say it would be almost impossible to do this system here organically. A normal year, our moisture levels, our humidity levels are too high, and disease could spread and probably would spread very quickly through this kind of operation. but this is what woods cultivated is. The yields are a little lower than under artificial shade. Takes a year or two longer to produce, but your yields are still pretty high. Value is down some because, again, it will look smoother. But this is what we really want to talk about today, and it's known as wild simulated ginseng. And it's where we try to get ginseng to grow as naturally as possible and to produce a root that is as natural and possible, not just in appearance, but in its bioactive constituents and many other things that we don't know how to measure. Many herbalists have shared with me that they feel they observe a difference in the healing properties of a wild simulated ginseng root compared to a woods grown or to an artificial shade grown root. This takes a long time. Your plants, your populations are very sparse. So they grow, many people grow these for 10 years or longer. Oftentimes people will plant ginseng. A grandfather will plant it for his new grandchild to help pay for their college education when they need it. That's the plan. So yields are low, but your roots, if done properly, those roots can be just as valuable on a price per pound basis as wild ginseng. You should not be able to tell the difference. Next, please. So this shows you a little bit of the difference in how these look. On the left is a shade-grown ginseng root. We call those slick roots. They're very smooth. They've grown very quickly. You see the necks are short. The roots on the right are wild roots, or wild simulated roots. And you see how long those necks are, which those are composed of bud scars. So each one of those bud scars you could count for a year that it's been growing. So on a price per pound basis, those roots on the right are much more valuable than the roots on the left. Next, please. So when we grow wild simulated ginseng, the most important factor is where you choose to plant it. Ginseng doesn't grow just everywhere, so that site selection is really critical. Next. In our area here, a north or northeast facing slope is best. At these lower elevations, if you get really high, it doesn't make that much of a difference. But when we're in a year like this, the south facing slopes are so dry, they're too dry for ginseng. So a north or a northeast facing slope, the work done by Bob Bifus, Scott Persons, and others have indicated that they do best under mixed hardwood forests, with his favorite trees being tulip poplar, Carolina silver bells, and black walnuts. In my experience over the years, I have not found them to be quite that particular. If it's mixed, if we've got good moisture level, adequate shade, and basically cool temperatures, I've seen ginseng thrive even under quite a bit more pine than many people would recommend. Next. Look for plants that ginseng likes to grow around. I'm assuming many of you have wild harvested ginseng, so you know what you look for to look for ginseng. You know the presence of certain plants that are like, aha, I'm probably going to find ginseng here. Do that same thing when you're looking for a place to plant ginseng. If you find wild ginseng there, of course, that's a great place to plant it. However, do we have anybody from West Virginia here? No, we don't. In West Virginia, you are not allowed to grow wild simulated ginseng where there's natural ginseng already growing there. So we won't get into that since we don't have any West Virginia folks here. So first you have to clear your site. One of the first ginseng growers that I worked with in North Carolina tried to put in a ginseng planting where there was a rhododendron thicket. I don't know why he chose to do that. That man worked so friggin' hard for so very long, and turned out it didn't really have good soil to grow ginseng in. So, I mean, look around. There's got to be other places. Look for things growing on that forest floor that ginseng would like to be a companion with. And then you should be able to just go through and clear out some of that undergrowth to be able to prepare a planting area. This looks really clean here, but this is late fall. I think we did that in like November. So, you know, everything's down at that point in time. Next slide. So there's been a lot of work, and this was led by Bob Vifus when he was at Cornell. Bob is now a consultant and grower on ginseng. Ginseng likes calcium. I think we need to do a lot more research on this topic, because when you change the calcium levels in your soil, you're also changing many other things going on with the nutrients and how they're released within the soil. But what most people do now when they prepare an area for wild simulated ginseng is they scatter some gypsum. Some calcium is going to be beneficial. It's not going to do any harm. Personally, I like to be very conservative with it and say don't put on more than 2,000 pounds of calcium per acre, but I know there's many people that are pushing 4,000 pounds to the acre. That's usually the only amendment that a wild simulated grower is making. And gypsum is an organic product, so just make sure if you're doing certified organic that the brand you choose is okay with your certifier. Next, please. Then I'm telling you about Scott Person's least work method of doing wild simulated ginseng. Scott has this down to a science. So what Scott does is he clears a 100 square foot strip at a time. And he makes a 5 foot wide strip, he has a mark on his rake. So this strip, he clears a site from the tip of his rake down to this mark on the handle, and he just does this strip, okay? He has it 20 feet long, he knows how to measure it out. It's 200 feet long. Measure it out so he can distribute the right amount of seed. But he clears this off and he starts at the bottom of the hill. Next slide. And here's my employee, Vicki. This is working on our site. She's raked aside the leaf litter, and then she's going to scatter some gypsum, rake it in a little bit. Next. And then we're getting ready to sow our seed. And this is a really crucial part. Get the best seed that you possibly can. Right now, everyone's hot on ginseng. There must be 50 or 60 different ginseng Facebook pages out there. You can buy it on eBay, you can buy it on Craigslist. You can buy cheap seed and you might get lucky and it might perform well for you. But just as often you get nothing. For me, I think what we're doing here is a lot of work. So I'm going to want to have pretty much guaranteed success. So buy good seed. If you can buy seed that's been produced locally, that's what we encourage people to do. And we would love to develop a system of seed available from local germplasm. This is something we've talked about for at least a dozen years. But right now, getting locally grown seed can be difficult. So most of the seed that you buy was produced under artificial shade, up in Wisconsin probably. But get good seed, buy it from someone with a good reputation, and don't expect it to be cheap. Remember that you have to handle ginseng seeds carefully. They must never be allowed to dry out. Every single fall, someone comes into my office and they reach in their pocket and they pull out some dried up seed all covered with pocket fuzz and go, "What do I do with these?" And I say, you throw them in that trash can. These are a living seed. They're not like a tomato seed or a bean seed. That immature embryo is still growing and developing, and that seed must be kept moist. Not wet, just moist. So here is your ginseng berry. You'll usually find 1 to 4 seeds in each berry. You'll see how it's white and very young looking. This is seed that has then been stratified for a year, and there that seed has matured more and is ready to go into the ground to be planted. And here's your little ginseng seedling. Next, please. I often get asked about seeding rates, In wild simulated systems, Scott Persons has determined that an ounce of seed in 100 square feet, once you have the little loss that you're going to expect to have, will usually give you the population that works out best. So that gives you about 10 pounds for a half acre and 25 pounds for an acre. But remember that this is a really big estimate, because when you're working in the woods, all of our woods are very, very different. So here's Scott scattering his seeds. So he's got his other friends out here opening up more area. Each one of his baggies has an ounce of seed weighed out, and he has gotten very good at just sprinkling that seed very evenly across that area. Next, please. Then he takes that leaf litter from the next section above and covers this area that he's just planted. And while he's doing that, he is packing, he's covering those seeds, he's also pushing them into the ground with his boots, and he's exposing the next planting area. And he just works his way up the slope this way. Next, please. Then he goes through and scatters some small branches on top to help hold those leaves and that leaf litter inside. And I'm sure part of this is to help disguise this as not a newly prepared area. Next, please. If you've not grown ginseng before, please remember that ginseng seedlings look very, very different than mature ginseng. So then in wild simulated ginseng, the idea is that once you have those seeds in the ground, those plants just grow and take care of themselves. And in many respects, this is true. You have those plants far enough apart that you shouldn't be out there doing anything for disease control. The plants should pretty much just be allowed to grow. But you need to go out there and make sure everything's okay. If there's fallen trees, you want to get those off your areas. Watch for erosion. At our work, we had an area where they did some construction on the land behind us, and suddenly we had water pouring right through our ginseng area that we had to divert. Voles can be horrendous. And for many people, voles were a real problem this year. How are you going to control that? Sometimes you can't. So when you plant ginseng, I suggest you plant ginseng in different patches. Don't plant everything in one area, because you could have something like voles come in and there's just nothing you're going to be able to do about it. Watch for signs of disease. Insects are pretty rare. Theft is going to be your issue. Next, please.
You mean how far apart you're saying?
You don't want your plants to touch. So usually you're going to end up with, and because it's just, while it's going to be different, but usually you're going to have like a plant here, and a plant here, and a plant here.
Still other stuff's going to come up between them.
Exactly. It's the ginseng leaf touching the ginseng leaf that's the problem. So if you get alternaria on one plant, it's not going to spread to those other plants because those aren't hosts. But if you've got ginseng and ginseng, it's going to spread. Make sense, Lori? So disease and pest prevention is your best way to go. The good site selection, good air and water movement. Never plant ginseng where it's going to have wet feet or you're almost going to be sure to get Phytophthora. Don't crowd those plants. The foliage shouldn't touch. And that plant diversity, companion planting, polyculture, whatever you want to call it, can be very helpful. You know that in your gardens where you mix plants, you usually have much fewer disease and insect problems than if you have a whole area like the size of this room all in one plant. Next, please. This is the most common disease that you're going to get. It's called alternaria. Ginseng blight is what we call it. And you can go out and do some spraying if we have a really bad humid year about this. And Robert will be covering this later on. What are some organic practices that you can use to control it? Next, please. This is the one I really worry about you getting, and this will usually happen as Phytophthora. It's a root rot, and it will go through your planting like just wildfire. Usually caused, I think almost always caused by too wet conditions. What you've got to be really careful about is you can spread this one on your tools and on your boots. So if you have an area that has this, You don't want to walk through it. You want to mark it off, and if it's on a slope, you're going to probably see it move downhill. So if you can stop that water movement from happening. Some people then will go in and remove these plants and then just try to make that area so it's not going to spread, and mark it off so they don't go in there. Next. Slugs for some of us is a real nemesis in a wild simulated setting. This can be a problem. In a more intensive setting, we can do things like the beer baits and such, but this is much harder to do in wild simulated. Next. I've mentioned the voles, mice, and rats traps. There are some bait products that are certified organic that you can use, but again, I worry about the wildlife, so make sure that any products you use are allowed by your certifier and aren't going to endanger wildlife within your region. Next. Deer, for some people, are a huge problem. And they'll come through and they'll just take those tops off year after year, eventually killing that root. For us, the deer really don't bother our ginseng very much, but for our seedling beds or projects where we just have to have that ginseng survive, we will build some cages. And I just show you this as maybe an idea of something you can do for your nursery beds or something. This is going to be our biggest problem, and I know some people in this room have really suffered from this. And this is where we have got to work together. We used to take the approach of saying, don't tell anybody you've got ginseng. Keep it really secret. Well, I know now that's just plain stupid. There are people in our woods. Okay, they're going to know it's there. So we're trying a new approach. And it's going to probably take a decade or so before we really know if it works. And this is more of letting people know you've got ginseng. Let your neighbors know. You know, spread the word a little bit. Do things like consider having a hunting lease on your property. My experience now with people that lease your property for birding, herb collection, hunting, whatever, is those people want to take care of that land like you do. And you could say, help me take care of this, and I'll give you a percentage of the sales. You know, make it worth their while. But we're now trying the more eyes and boots on the ground, the better, because the trying to keep it secret didn't work. We also have technology. Lots of people now, there's lots of webcams out there everywhere. But the problem is, can you get there in time? And more of the webcam pictures are showing people with the ski masks on, and they're hiding their license plates. So what was working there for a short period of time is an issue. This is just showing your progression. These are your seedling ginseng, 2-year-olds, 3-year-olds, and 4-year-olds. Next, please. And I wanted to show, lots of folks are under the impression right now that this is wild simulated ginseng. I wanted to show the difference. This is wild simulated ginseng production. This actually was a huge area up in Avery County. You really can't tell where the ginseng is there. It's scattered all through. This is woods grown, very intensive. This is Harding's farm in Maryland. This is not growing just all by itself. He's out there doing a lot to raise that and care for it. Next, please.
Janine, are those woods grown ginseng going to look like more like cultivated roots or not?
More like cultivated, yes. They're going to be in between. And some woods cultivated growers just seem to be able to get a wilder looking root in a shorter period of time. People like Larry Harding have been at this a long time. They've got it down pretty well. But yes, it will look more cultivated than the wild simulated. The flowers and fruit, just your development to a ripe fruit. Next, please. Collecting those seeds. Collect those berries when they're ripe. Go ahead. And then all you do is mash that fruit, put some water on it, let it ferment for a day or two, just a day or two, until that pulp becomes free of the seed. Rinse and decant. Next, please. And then you're going to make some kind of stratification container, because those seeds need a year to continue maturing for the inhibitors to leach out before you're going to plant them. So this year, we harvested our seed. We made little seed pouches out of we just used window screen and moistened playground sand because it's very clean, and we bury it in an area where ginseng would grow. It's exposed to the natural heating and cooling of the environment. Rainwater goes through, and then a year later, next year at this time, we would be seeding this out, and it would come up the next spring. Next, please.
You said they're in a pouch, so the seeds are bunched
They're
together?
mixed with sand.
Okay.
So some people do boxes, stratification boxes, but I'm finding that most of us aren't getting that much seed to begin with. So we just make envelopes basically out of window screen and a stapler, mix it with that moist sand and put it in there. So you don't want the seed all bunched up together. It's in there together and it needs to stay moist. Yes, sir?
What happens if they sprout in there?
You don't want that to happen. A few of them might, because ginseng seed within that head of fruits will mature at different rates, but you really rather not have that happen. But usually the next season you won't find very many have sprouted. I rarely do, and then you seed them out, okay?
Adding gypsum is also supposed to increase the seed production. Is that true, or is it more for root size?
It's more for root size. I have not seen any effect on the berries. I have seen more year-to-year effects on my berry production. Okay? Then we get into harvest, and this is where you've got to think about way ahead of time, how many of your roots are you going to harvest, and how are you going to go about doing it? And some people just aren't prepared for this part of it at all. So think about what you're going to do. Are you going to have a crew of people out there? What kind of tools are you going to use to make it happen? Next, please. And then what's changing in this industry is, for hundreds of years, ginseng was sold as dry root. You know, you sell to a registered, a licensed dealer, or you're one. And we've always been dealing in dried root. That's what gets sent to China. But in the past 5 years, more and more of these dealers have been buying fresh, wet root, and they're taking care of the drying themselves. In that case, you just clean them off a little bit. Maybe not even this clean, and that's going to, you need to talk to your dealer. How clean do they want it? This year, I'm seeing a trend toward quit washing them so much. You know, just get the dirt off. Margaret, next. Yep. But if you're doing the traditional way of drying, did we miss the washing one?
It's next.
Okay, so I did it backwards. Okay. You've got to wash it, and how are you going to go about doing that? You can burn up a lot of water if this is your whole method of using a pressure hose. So we learned from some of the other dealers. We bought one of these small cement mixers. It's got plastic, so it can be easily cleaned back out again. We add some water, we tumble it for a few minutes, dump that water out, maybe do a second rinse that way, and then we just finish with the hose. With ginseng, you don't get ginseng as clean as other roots, and I'm afraid as time goes on, our food safety acts are going to get into this, but right now, we still like that little bit of definition that the dirt gives in the wrinkles on the roots. Next, please. And then if you have to go ahead and dry your roots, you've got to be prepared with how to do that. This is where most people mess up ginseng. They don't dry it properly, it gets moldy or mildewy, or they dry it at too high a temperature initially, and it seals the outside of the root and the inside does not dry properly. So we've got plans on how to dry. Think low temperature, high air movement. Next, please. Yes,
In
Jean?
the tumbler, were you have any issues with broken neck nodes, or you just like, you're just doing it for research, but for someone who may be exporting?
If I had really beautiful roots with really long necks, I would be handling each one of those individually. If that was what was important to my buyer, to keep it all intact, yes, I would be doing those individually, and then I'd be doing the swoosh method. Good question, very good question. So here are roots that have been dried properly, good-looking roots. See, again, there is some dirt there that gives a definition to those wrinkles. Next, please. Margaret? How are we doing time-wise?
We're good, we got 20 minutes.
Oh, great, fantastic.
Hi, so we've talked about the roots again, and we'll just have a few slides on how to grow jiaogulan. Again, it's native to South China, also areas of Japan, South Korea, and Vietnam. It contains what they call gympenosides, which are very similar to the ginsenosides. And in some research I've recently read, they say that up to 9 of those are identical chemical constitution to some of the ones found in ginseng. It's also thought that in the research that's been going on from the late 70s until the present, and more recently with modern lab tests and things, that they have even more spread of ginsenosides and gympenosides than is known of ginseng. So very interesting. Again, this is the top of the plant, the aerial parts that are used. And it grows well in southern Appalachia. Our good friend Joe Hollis, who was intended to be here today, has really worked to bring some of the plants, particularly jiaogulan in this case, to this area and work with it to how it can grow here and become more of part of our natural products industry. So it's very easy to grow, perennial. It grows fast. You can grow it by seed. However, it's most often propagated by cuttings, which root really easily. If you do grow from seed, it is a dioecious plant, so you need to have both male and female. In plots that we've grown, we haven't had that problem. They seem to grow out pretty well from the plants that we've received from Joe. It also spreads by underground stolons, and some know it is known as a ground cover to many. If you leave it on the ground, it'll grow in a thick mat. However, as you can see in these plots, we've put some small trellising in, and then you're going to get a lot more area to grow that plant in. You can also grow it in smaller spaces. Forest edge, in this case, it's in a part shade lath house, where we do some research out in Mills River. So using the forest or a structure for shade there. You'll want to clear your site, and again, this is as far as we've known, has been a low feeder in terms of what it needs for fertility. We did add compost when we planted our cuttings. We also will add a layer of mulch each year, for which both adds to the soil in that area as well as provides weed protection. As well, it grows really well in containers, and you can see some small plants of jiaogulan out at the table outside at Robert's booth. Just get an idea of what it looks like in its small form. As well, we have an herbarium voucher here of some of the plants from our research plots.
And that's a good example when we talk about vouchers, what we're talking about.
Mm-hmm. And again, allow it to trellis, not only to have more surface area and more growth that you can harvest and use, but also for aeration. Joe has a lot more info on this. I encourage you to talk to him more about jiaogulan if you're interested in growing it. But from what we found, it's only susceptible to a little bit of mold and things like that, which can be removed, and we'd like to do some more research on that. When you harvest it, you cut the aerial parts so all the leaf and stem are used. When they're bright green, you'll see differences through the season, especially if you have like a high drought year like we're experiencing, where some of that bright green will fade. And I imagine, I don't have any research to back that up, that that's going to be less valuable in terms of its medicinal quality, but I don't see any testing going on for that now. And this is also neat. It's the aerial portion, so you're not disrupting the root. It's perennial, but you get many harvests per year. We've done up to 5 harvests, usually about 3 for some of the other growers that I know that are playing with this plant. To dry this, again, we're looking at low heat and high air movement as we are for roots, and you can cut that into 4 or 6 inch sections. Lay it out on your screens or whatever you're using for drying, and then you can cut and sift, or depending on your use, or if you're selling to an herbalist or other buyer, what they prefer that end product to be.